Week 2 was a humbling week for the ACC overall. Starting at the top, Clemson barely escaped Troy with a win. And with Antonio Williams banged up, I'm not sure if they deserve that top spot anymore. Meanwhile, on the positive side, you had Florida State, who might have only been playing East Texas A&M, but they did hang 77 points on them. Offense looked, like a well-oiled machine, and that built some confidence for me, especially after beating Alabama the week prior. The problem for the league, though, is that they took some really bad L's against other power conferences. Boston College took Michigan State to the buzzer, but lost a heartbreaker in double OT. Virginia Tech just completely shat the bed in the second half against Vanderbilt. And SMU also, they lose an OT to Baylor. So not a great look for the ACC as a whole. But let's talk about teams that are going to rise in these power rankings. And we've already talked about them, but Florida State is really the big one for me. And that's 2 straight statement wins against wildly different levels of competition. But for me, they've solidified themselves as a real threat in the ACC. And really someone that could be a dark horse CFP team as well if they can hold on. And Boston College is the next team I want to talk about. And even in a loss, they showed that they have one of the more dangerous offenses in the league. Their quarterback was a big surprise to me. So don't be shocked if they play spoiler later this year to some teams that are in contention. NC State also deserves some credit. CJ Bailey to Wesley Grimes looks like one of the more exciting connections in the league. They have the offensive firepower at wideout, at tight end, and Hollywood Smothers gives them a workhorse back. And the last team I want to talk about that's going to rise up these rankings is Cal. Quietly, they're 2-0, and while the competition hasn't been elite, they have beaten a decent team in Oregon State, and they've proven they're not going to be the pushover that I thought they might be coming into the year. Now, I want to talk about some teams who fell. SMU being the main one here. You can't lose to Baylor at home in double OT the way they did. It's a real gut punch to your season. It's a game they really needed to win if they wanted any kind of national credibility. Next, Duke is going to stumble down the rankings a little bit. Illinois smacked them around, and I know Duke had some kind of turnover issues and some unforced errors, but I think the game really just exposed how far they are from being a legit contender. And lastly, Virginia Tech has to be a faller. That second half collapse against Vandy was flat out embarrassing for them and for the league. You can't get outscored 34-0. It makes it suits for itself for rock bottom for your program. And then lastly, let's talk Syracuse. They're going to tumble. I gave them a lot of credit for having a tough schedule, but you just can't need overtime to beat UConn at home, then run sprints on the field. It just screams trouble moving forward for them. All right, so let's run through the full power rankings as we head into week 3 of the season. And as always, we start with tier 1, which I break those down as the legit national contenders, CFP type teams. Miami's going to move into the top spot this week. Carson Beck has continued to look sharp. Tony's building a budding star of a campaign. And they're just winning in the trenches on both sides of the ball. Clemson stays in this group, but that Troy scare has me worried a little bit, as well as Antonio Williams' injury questions. I'm not sure they belong on the same pedestal, but a lot's going to be found out next week when they play Georgia Tech. Now, tier 2, we move into the capable challengers section. These are guys that can give those top spots a run for their money. Louisville comes in at number 3. They keep taking care of business, and I'm comfortable with them there. Georgia Tech comes in at 4. They handled Gardner-Webb last week. We're going to find out a ton next week when they play Clemson. Florida State is new to this group, and, like we talked about before, sure, it was East Texas A&M, but you put up 77 points. You beat Alabama. It's hard not to feel really good about where this team is heading. As we look at tier 3, those are the teams that could make noise throughout the rest of the year. SMU has dropped into this bucket for me. That double OT loss was brutal. They're not out of the picture, but that window is closing. NC State is the next team in this group. The offense, again, looked really great with Bailey and Hollywood Smothers, but the defense has to fix some of these third down issues and overall issues they're facing, and it has to happen fast. Pitt staying in this group as well. They handled that game like Pitt normally does. They were steady, physical, nothing flashy necessarily, but it works. Duke is still staying in this group, but they're towards the bottom of it now. They got exposed by Illinois. They showed they're just not ready to really be considered a top-tier team yet. Darian Mensah does look really good. And then I'm still keeping Virginia in this group despite the loss to NC State. It was a late pick that ended up sealing it, but they're still miles more competitive than last year. And then Boston College, we're moving them up into this group. Yeah, the Michigan State loss hurts a little bit, but the offense looks dangerous. And I'm telling you, don't be surprised if BC punches above their weight throughout the course of the ACC season. Moving on to tier 4, these are teams that have low ceilings. Cal surprisingly moves up into this group. They're 2-0. They're still bottom half of the league talent-wise, but they could make some noise. Virginia Tech stays here. First half was great. Second half was a total collapse. You can't get outscored 34-0 and feel like you have any aspirations whatsoever. UNC is going to stay in this group. Belichick got his first win. Congratulations, but it was against UNC Charlotte. And that offense still looked abysmal. Syracuse is barely hanging on. They're trending towards being non-competitive. They looked ugly throughout the most of that game against UConn, and you just can't go to overtime there. And then lastly, tier 5, the non-competitive teams. There's only 2 of them there this week. Wake Forest, they did get a win against Western Carolina, but I think when they play real teams, it's going to get ugly. And then bringing up the rear is Stanford. Another week, another blowout loss, this time to BYU, starting a true freshman quarterback. It looks like one of the weakest teams in the Power 5, and that's a bit embarrassing. So that's the full picture of the ACC. Miami's on top. Clemson's showing some cracks, could slide even more after next week, and FSU's building momentum. And a whole lot of teams in the middle are trying to figure out who they are and where they're going to fit into this machine as it goes ahead. So I want to end this up by taking a look at the week ahead. And there's 2 games that I really think could define the ACC's trajectory. The first one is Clemson versus Georgia Tech, and it's going to be a gut check for the Tigers. We're going to find out, are they still elite, or is Georgia Tech going to kind of shuffle the order of the deck a little bit and take their spot? It could throw the whole conference into a little bit of a chaos if Clemson picks up a loss this early and Georgia Tech stays undefeated. The second game I want to talk about is Miami versus USF. The Bulls, they've beaten Boise State. They've beaten Florida. They're coming in hot. Miami needs to prove that they're a playoff team here. They need to make a statement, win this game, keep the ACC's momentum going forward, make sure that they solidify themselves as a national kind of contender, and you can't do that and lose to USF. So the ACC has had some momentum early season, took a bit of a step back last week. Next week, we're going to find out a whole lot more, and it's going to tell us if there's a lot of real hype here or if it's just some early season pre-clarity type information. So stick around. I hope you guys stay subscribed to the channel, see next week's power rankings. I appreciate you being here. I'll see you next week.